welcome everyone. Shall we sit?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Let's stay a while, as they say. All right. So we're super happy to. First, I'm super happy to have this conversation with Carme, with Michael, and to get a chance to talk to you about deep tech, about Europe, about conscious innovation. And I'm going to assume that's different than unconscious innovation. I don't know. Is there such a thing? All right. So I think the pre-setup of this conversation is that innovation is South Summit. There is entrepreneurship everywhere, right? I mean, it's all about entrepreneurship, and a part of that entrepreneurship is technology. So fine. But then within technology, there's deep technology. And so, we're getting kind of narrower and narrower about, just like what kind of innovation we're talking about. And I personally think Europe has a huge advantage. A lot of things that can be done in the deep tech space, has a lot of great institutions, has a lot of knowledge. And ultimately, Europe needs to have its fair share of contribution in this space to the world. And Michael, you're representing Europe and you're representing Silicon Valley. Carme, you are really the leader in the policy that's been set in Europe, and you're still advising. So we're going to basically talk about all of this combined. And to get started, maybe I can just ask you both like a quick, your view on this. Where have we come from in Europe, and like where have we gotten to? Before we get to what we want to do next, I don't think we were always, the leaders in deep tech. But what's been happening? Carmen, why don't we come around this way? Let's do that.
Ladies first.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me and being the chance to be in South Summit one more year. Yeah, we know that Europe has always been leading in the industrial space. And we have also been leading in the research space. In fact, the most relevant academia, and you know that the US has been successful thanks to brilliant minds from all over the world, from Europe, from India. But we did something wrong during I would say 2006, 2007, because we had this enormous crisis in 2008.
Right.
And at that moment of time, a brand new industry was starting on the digital space.
That's a global crisis, though. Not just here.
A global crisis. But we were not looking at the new emerging technologies because we were trying to save our industry.
Yeah.
So we're looking for how are we going to save our industry, and we were not looking about the great advancements on I would say, Industry 4.0, how digital could also enhance the existing industry. So we were not able to build the first generation of digital unicorns in Europe, so digital platforms.
Because we were distracted.
We were distracted, and we didn't have the great background that Silicon Valley has, which is the great combination between VCs, academia, and technology transfer. Remember that the US is built on these big, I would say, powers, especially the great investment on defense that later was transferred in the 80s towards the civil use. We didn't have that in Europe. And then all this unique environment of industry, VC especially, and tech transfers, we didn't have it. We have other values and we have other weak points. But we must remember that the number of startups per year in Europe is exactly the same number of startups per year in the US. Mm-hmm. The problem is that we do have the startups, but the startups don't find the funding to grow up and become unicorns from Europe.
It's an interesting comment that you're making, that we were not just distracted, but that there's a bit of protecting and fixing what already existed, so we couldn't work on the new. And if I can just say, my own experience with US is they don't seem to care that much about the old. If it comes down, it just comes down, but they're always okay to let people disrupt. And actually, I wanted to give Michael, get a little perspective from him, because you're from Silicon Valley, and I would say you're also from Europe. You I don't know, you have like dual, authenticity now, and that's a new word, okay? Some people have dual visas. He has dual authenticity. And so what what happens in U.S. that is different? What does Europe do differently, better? Just compare the two. I think that would be like a good start.
Well, we're just better at marketing, right? I mean,
Okay.
we all know it's software, but we call it AI. We all know it's just technology, but we call it deep tech, right? Sounds really cool. So we're very good at marketing. I mean, Silicon Valley is all about fast, fast, fast.
That's right. There's a big speed.
That works for certain things.
Yeah.
Doesn't work for other things. As we look around the world today, which to many of us looks pretty fragile, we've got a lot of problems that have been heaped on us for decades and decades. These are not problems that are going to be solved quickly or with technologies that can be developed in 3 months and companies that can be flipped in 6 years, right? It's going to take more thought. And
that's actually what Silicon Valley tends to focus on, right? I mean, they focus, there's a lot of software, a lot of market fit right at the end. I don't see US doing that much on the deeper tech.
No, it's always the shiny object right in front of us.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if you look across Europe, we have many great examples of very successful deep tech startups in Europe. In Helsinki, you've got a company called ICEYE that's doing Earth observation that has grown like crazy in the last 10 years. In Stockholm, you've got O2 formulating a new steel product that is very sustainable. In Epson, again, back to Finland, we've got IQM in quantum computing. I mean, we have great examples of deep tech companies that have really grown up fast in Europe. And when I look at these companies, and I'm involved in some of them, what I see is these are companies that understand the talent pools in Europe that are available to them, and they go seek them out cross-border, no matter where they are. I mean, ICEYE's entire software development
Europe
team...
or cross-border global?
Cross-border Europe.
Yeah, okay.
Or globally, but starting in Europe, I mean, like ICEYE's whole software development team is in Warsaw, right? And it's a different mentality than what I saw 10 years ago investing in companies in Europe, where it was very much in-country product, in-country talent, in-country market. So that's changed quite a bit.
So the storyline, I mean, the way that we're trying to organize this conversation is we started somewhere. We're definitely making some progress. You're pointing examples of companies, are talking about, you know, the initial conditions that, you know, let this happen. I'll give you, you know, I'll ask you a few words about, you know, what you think happened either on the policy side or the culture side, or just what happened in Europe that we were able to kind of have this acceleration. But I don't want you to go too long on that because I want to get to where do we want to go. So tell me, I'm moderating the time here.
Yes, I want to build on these two comments, very important points. I mean, the success of the software industry in the US is because it's moving fast, because it's been always in an unregulated environment and with a lot of deep pockets. So we didn't have any of this. We were fragmented, we were not working as a unique single market, and that's especially important in the digital market. When talk about regulation in Europe, that's not always bad, because regulation allowed, for example, Europe was leader in the mobile space during many, many years because we agreed on the standards of GMS.
Yes,
but the problem is not legislation, is legislative fragmentation. So we are coming from a point when we had 27 different legislation. It was very difficult to compete in Europe because France, Germany, Italy, and Spain had totally different fragmentations that can work in the industrial space but don't work anymore in digital space. So we're moving from that heterogeneity to a unique single digital market.
Is it happening?
It is already happening with the last 5 years with the GDPR, the Data Act, the DSM, and the Data Act, with our only one regulation. 27 countries, they won. While in the other side, I see the opposite movement in the US.
Yeah.
Executive order of Biden on AI is not enacting.
Right.
So every single state is having a different law. So you have a different law in California, in Texas, in Florida, in New York. So we are like, I don't know what happens. I hope it doesn't make the same mistakes, but we're trying to learn from the mistakes from the past. And I see there's, especially in the AI sector, a different trend in the US now.
Well, in addition to this fragmentation, you have very different dynamics between startups and governments and startups and large enterprises. In the US, large enterprises love buying from startups.
That's right.
Right? Because it's R&D that they don't have to do. In the US, governments have to buy from startups and minority-owned business. It's the law. And there's a database in the US we have called Input, where any small company can go in and they can see every government contract that has been bid, who the primary is that won the contract, know what percentage of the minority or startup business quotient that hasn't been filled in that contract, and contact them and say, hey, I've got a small company, I can fulfill your quotient, and it works very well. We don't have this in Europe. In Europe, governments, enterprises don't buy from startups.
I think it's not just Europe. I think there's a lot of places in the world where there's this culture mindset. I know exactly the one you're talking about. It's basically when you're at a big company, you kind of look down at the startups. You're like, oh, we're like a giant company, and you guys are just a few people, and why are you good enough to sell to us? Well, literally, this is like what happens. But what those progressive companies have figured out is we don't want to take the risk, and those few people will take the risk for us. And so, sure, you do this risky thing, and you do that risky thing. And if you make us look good, good for you, and you'll get more money. But if you do a bad job, we're still here, and you won't be. And people, in that part of the world have come to that understanding. They're okay with letting them take the risk. But I think, I don't know, Karma, you could speak to whether you think that mindset is coming, whether the understanding that startups are really part of the ecosystem is here, right? And in fact, I can make that a bridge question to topic 2, because we want to get into what is conscious innovation. And if you want to say, well, what's happening on the mindset, or even what is it like to be entrepreneurial in Europe? Just like, what's your perspective on
Well, my perspective,
innovation?
I've been the responsible for the startup law in Spain, so
yeah.
I've been a startup myself, so I know for sure that, in Spain, at least you need to be a hero to be, to be having a startup. And that's what we tried to change already last year with the startup law, enabling, of course, risk opportunities, support for business angels, better conditions for, of course, stock options, and all the motivations we need, because we really rely on the innovation of startups and that ecosystem. At the same time, from being a person who has been a Secretary of State and be responsible for government procurement, it's very difficult because government must have a lot of guarantees, and it's very difficult for startups to support all those financial
alternative suppliers.
Okay. But that's what is so important, open innovation, and that we gather big companies with small companies, creating those ecosystems for innovation and technology transfer. And you were talking about specifically on my vision on...
I want to know, in a minute, I'm going to ask Michael, what is conscious innovation?
Okay.
And try to get the balance of, maybe what that means for Europe. But I think there is what does it mean to be an entrepreneur in Europe? What does it feel like? Does that mean you're
I think we have a our unique strength is our unique weakness. Because we are in a very heterogeneous continent with a lot of languages, with a lot of culture. We have a richness in the way we see the world, which I don't see in any other parts of Spain. I don't see it in the US, I don't see it in China, where the thinking is much more monolithic. So we're very valuable on that. But that's against the model of the tech sector, which usually tends to standardize, and it's only valuable as long as it's economies of scale. So as long as Europe is able to find their own way, and their own way are probably not in the traditional digital sector. We've seen that 2 out of 3 vaccines for COVID come from Europe.
That's right.
That's
deep tech.
We have been investing in renewables, and the US has not been investing in renewables for the last 15 years. They need to invent an incentive with this IRA to attract the European renewables to the States. For example, new materials, that's where the innovation comes in Europe, quantum computing. And the mistake we do is that we follow the lead as a hertz of the strategies that the venture capital in the US are leading. They say, go for .com, we all go for .com. Fintech, fintech. NFTs, NFTs. Generative AI, why?
Yeah.
Why do we follow as herd? We need to say, okay, a percentage of my money will go to your industry just in case I miss something, but I keep on investing in my core values because all the money that goes there doesn't go to the traditional areas where Europe is better than the others.
You know, copying is a great way to be number two, right? You can never be number one by copying.
But we're number one in many areas, but the money doesn't go there because it's going elsewhere, where the US companies won't.
But that means you have to have your own investment thesis. You know, if Sequoia says this is our investment thesis, or Andreessen Horowitz says this is our investment thesis, we believe in software is going to eat the world or whatever, then everyone who follows their investment thesis is number two after them. So I think that's a call to all the investors here. What is your investment thesis that is not a copy of other people's? All right, I got to go to you. Conscious innovation. What is that?
Well, I think this is a different approach that could be very powerful for Europe. Conscious innovation in general refers to a mindset of being more thoughtful and long-term when you're developing.
Or maybe what's the problem? Why do we need it? And then,
why do you need to be conscious when you're innovating? I mean, think about all of the products that we've created in just the last decade, okay? Smartphones, social media, right? Great things for some applications, terrible things for other applications, right? I mean, you can see a direct correlation between suicide rates amongst teens in the United States and the introduction of Facebook.
I was really just thinking about that. I mean, you mentioned it the other day, but like, I even showed that to my wife and my kids, and my wife has one perspective on it. Oh my God, can we cancel their accounts? And my kids are like, this is nonsense, and we're not giving anything up. But continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, now we're unleashing generative AI, not just with text, but with image, with video. I mean, for any of you that have played with any of these video generation tools, it's quite outstanding what you can generate with a few simple prompts. Is it appropriate to put this in front of a 10-year-old on an iPad? Like, we don't know. We've never asked the question. So I would say this is unconscious innovation. We're not thinking about the societal impacts.
I'll let you keep going, but I want to add a data point. I just read this out of an MIT article like yesterday, literally yesterday. To generate one image, you know, when you put in a prompt to get one image back, takes the same amount of energy as charging a cell phone from empty to full.
Yeah.
That's just one image.
Yeah.
Do you know what that AI is going to do to the energy footprint of the world?
Yeah, and again, we're not asking the question about CO2 production, resource consumption. Is this the best use of resource consumption? There are companies now that are starting up who are moving AI training workloads from data center to get to one that's near a low power source and run it and then send it back over to the main source where it happened. I mean, this stuff is happening in real time now because the cost is already too high. But I think the more important part of conscious innovation is really thinking long-term about where are we putting our energies, our scientific energies, our creative energies, into solving the problems that exist in this fragile world we're in today. And the people who are thinking most about this are some of the people in this room. I call them next-gen innovators, typically people in their 20s. We all know the 20s generation is the time when people are most clever, most creative, they're closest to the cutting-edge technology. It's the easiest time to take risk in your life. And these are the people that we should be betting on to solve these problems, also because they're very passionate about it.
And letting them, taking the hook.
But the truth is, the average age of a founder in Silicon Valley that raises a Series A is 46 years old, right?
Exactly.
The money is not going in this direction.
Yeah.
Let me add something. Something on this conscious. Because for me, conscious innovation requires a long-term view. It's not only that because you have short-term games, short-term opportunities, the winner takes it all, and then we have all burned ground on our back. And I think that's a responsibility for technology development. We cannot just suspect technology and then a decade after realize of the impacts and try to solve them, because we don't have a second chance. If we don't do it right first time, the negative effects we're creating in people, in children, in mindset, in society, in democratic values, we will not be able to revert them back. So our generation has a unique responsibility towards the future generations. And that's make development.
Who is our generation?
I mean, the ones we are taking the decisions now.
Yeah, well, no offense, but we're not doing shit.
No.
This is almost my third time in the 20s.
The point is, let me say, unfortunately, the ones that are on power are 40-something. And the guys that make the decisions are making decisions for the next generation. The next generation will not have time to complain because decisions have already been made. This is why we need to make very, very responsible that we can encompass technology development with sustainability and with ethics and with long-term impacts for the markets, but also for people in society.
You're kind of finishing or communicating the definition of conscious innovation. And I think collectively, I just want to get this message across. You can always sell a product or just make something work, but getting something that is basically good for the customer and good for the world and having this entire balance and like thinking, what does it really mean? I almost feel like you need that whole thing even to make the little thing work.
So I want to interject there. For all of you entrepreneurs here, one of the things that we do in our foundation when we work with teams is we really challenge them to maximize the positioning of their creation. And where almost 100% of startups miss this is stretching your impact into society.
Yeah.
And to the extent that you can do that, you can completely reposition your company. I'll give you an example. We work with a company out of Munich called Konix that has a rail sensor system, and they collect all kinds of digital information from the rail system, and they do all kinds of great things like predictive maintenance and real-time asset tracking. We were a couple years ago brainstorming how could we better position this company, because we have to talk to a lot of government officials to sell to rail companies. We have to get support from these, CEOs of these rail companies. What do these people care about? And one of our engineers came in one day and he said, did you know after the bicycle, the train is the most sustainable form of transportation in the world? In fact, it's the most sustainable form of mass transportation in the world. The complete positioning the company turned to, we are scaling sustainable transportation across the planet. And all of a sudden, we're raising money easier. We're flying to China with Angela Merkel on her airplane. Like, it just became so much easier. So I would really challenge you to think about your creations and how you can stretch the value into things that are important in society today.
Exactly. I think the message is you got to actually help the world if you're going to be successful. I think we're at the kind of towards the end of time here. So I'm going to ask you some version of either a closing message but I'm going to seed you with an idea that you can respond to. I'm interested in where are the technology areas, what those might be, and also what else does Europe need to pay attention to besides the technology areas? What's happening around us that we better be watching?
I think now we are seeing, of course, the emergence of generative AI as the big thing.
Opportunity, that's what you're saying?
I think the generative AI is like a new operating system. The value will not come from the basic models, will come from the vertical applications on those models, the unique data every single industry sector can provide to that and unique industry. That's where we see the gaps. 51% of companies in the US are already using generative AI, 71% in China, only 15% in Europe. Yeah. So the gap is on the adoption, and I think it's important. I think that we need to use AI also for scientific research. We're going to see a lot of innovation in scientific research, pharmaceutical and repurposing of drugs, discovering of new materials. I think there are areas biotechnology where Europe is very good at. And I think that we should do that with regulation, with limits, with ethical guidelines, and with sustainability by default.
Perfect. Okay, so AI applied to medicine, biology, and doing it in a I think, a policy framework that hopefully says this is what you can do instead of this is what you cannot do.
Yes, why don't we do it right first time? I'm sometimes so worried by big tech are so, scared of doing things right. Are you going to be less competitive because you don't pollute? Are you going to be less competitive because you are unethical? I think that's not the mindset.
It's hard to regulate yourself in the end.
If I was smart enough to be able to give you those areas, I'd be go out and starting those companies myself.
Fair.
So this is why I spend all my time around universities with next-gen innovators, people in their 20s.
What's Rise Europe again?
And with Rise Europe, that's right. Because these are where the ideas are coming from, and these are the people who are most passionate about solving the problems that we have heaped on them, right? So yeah, we should mention Rise Europe.
I think you should do it.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know Rise Europe, this is an organization that is looking across all the countries in Europe and the best technical universities, the best incubators and accelerators, and looking at how we can tie connections together. So one of the initiatives that we're just launching now is called the AI Launchpad, and this is being run out of ETH Zurich, where they have one of the largest NVIDIA compute farms in the world. And the idea is if you have a project, you can apply to AI Launchpad, you can get back-end computing support, but you can also have the opportunity to travel between different accelerator, incubator, university innovation systems in Europe to see what is the market like there, what are people working on there that's similar or different or maybe complementary to me over a one-year period of time. And it's a really cool program.
So it's like a map that lets you navigate all of Europe, even if we have the advantages that it's all different and we have the diversity. Rise Europe is giving you that network as an innovator to turn it into one market. All right. Okay, well, I want to thank you both for taking really valuable time to be here. I actually wish that we had the format that we could ask you all your questions. That's a hint for future, but we're not allowed to do that. But I want to thank you for taking time, sharing your views. You're both incredibly knowledgeable, and you've done a lot of amazing work that many people would aspire to be able to do what you have done. So thanks for being here and sharing your perspective.
Thank you.